The Galactic Survey vessel Horizon drifted through the empty space near 9. The planet below was a nightmare made real. It glowed with a sickly orange color from the toxic clouds that covered its surface. No sane species would ever set foot on that world. The Galactic Council had classified it as Category Omega, which meant death for any living thing that touched its surface. Stood at the observation window and watched the planet spin slowly beneath them. He was the only human on board. The rest of the crew belonged to 3 different alien species, and they all kept their distance from did not mind. He was used to it by now. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago, and most aliens still did not know what to make of them. The ship shook without warning, grabbed the railing as alarms began to scream throughout the vessel. Red lights flashed in every corridor. The captain's voice came through the speakers, but could not understand the rapid alien language. He only knew that something had gone very wrong. He ran toward the engineering section where he worked. The hallways were filled with panicking crew members. A scientist named nearly crashed into him. The tall, thin alien had gray skin and 4 eyes that were all wide with terror. Behind him came a communications officer, was shorter and covered in soft blue fur. His small hands trembled as he clutched a data tablet. A medic named followed close behind. She had smooth purple skin and large dark eyes that showed nothing but fear. The ship shook again, harder this time, heard the terrible sound of metal tearing somewhere below them. The floor tilted sharply to one side. He knew that sound. He had heard it once before during a training exercise on a damaged station. The ship was breaking apart. "Emergency pods," shouted at the 3 aliens. "Now." They did not argue. They followed him as he ran toward the nearest pod bay. Other crew members rushed past them heading in different directions. Reached the pod bay and saw that most of the pods had already launched. Only one remained. He grabbed and shoved him through the hatch and climbed in after him, jumped in last and hit the launch button just as the ceiling above them collapsed. The pod shot away from the dying ship. Through the small viewport, watched the horizon break into 3 pieces. 2 sections tumbled away into space. The third, the largest piece, fired its emergency thrusters and pulled away from the planet. It was damaged but alive. The survivors on that section might make it. But the pod was falling. 9 reached up with its toxic clouds and pulled them down into its embrace, strapped himself into a seat and braced for impact. The 3 aliens screamed as the pod entered the atmosphere. Fire surrounded them. The heat inside the small space became almost unbearable. Warning lights flashed everywhere. Then came the impact. The pod hit the ground hard and bounced twice before coming to rest. His head slammed against his harness. Stars danced in his vision. He heard the aliens groaning around him, but they were alive. Somehow, they were all alive. Unstrapped himself and checked on the others. Had a cut on his forehead, but it was not serious. Was shaking so badly he could not speak. Seemed physically fine, but her eyes were empty with shock. Gave them a moment to recover while he checked the pod systems. The communications array was damaged but functional. He managed to send a signal to the surviving section of the horizon. The response came back filled with static, but he understood enough. The ship had sent a distress call to the nearest galactic survey station. Help would arrive in 15 standard days. Until then, the survivors on the ship could not risk another descent. The 4 crew members in the pod were on their own. 15 days on 9. Looked at the environmental readings on the pod's display. The atmosphere outside contained 17 different toxic compounds. The temperature was currently at 48 degrees, but would drop to -20 during the night cycle. Acidic rain fell every few hours. The planet was also home to silicon-based predators that hunted anything that moved. Had recovered enough to read the same display. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly as he processed the information. "This is impossible," he said. His voice was quiet and hollow. "We cannot survive here for 15 days. We cannot survive here for 15 hours. This world will kill us." made a high-pitched sound of despair, simply stared at the floor. Understood their fear. By every galactic standard, they were already dead. No species in the known universe could survive on a Category Omega world without heavy technological support. Their emergency supplies would last 3 days at most. Their environment suits would begin to degrade within a week. The math was simple and cruel, but was human, and humans had a different relationship with simple and cruel math. He stood up and moved to the pod's supply locker. Inside, he found 4 environment suits, a basic medical kit, emergency rations, water purification tablets, a multi-tool, and a small plasma cutter. It was not much. It was almost nothing, but had worked with less before. "What are you doing?" asked. "There is no point in checking supplies. We are going to die here." Pulled on his environment suit and sealed the helmet. He grabbed the multi-tool and the plasma cutter. Then he turned to face the 3 aliens. They looked at him like he had lost his mind. 15 days, said. That's plenty of time. His 4 eyes widened, stopped trembling long enough to stare, finally looked up from the floor. Plenty of time for what? She asked. Moved to the pod hatch and placed his hand on the release lever. Through the viewport, he could see the hellish landscape of 9. Orange clouds filled the sky. Strange rock formations jutted up from the ground like broken teeth. In the distance, something large moved through the haze. He looked back at his alien companions. They were scientists, communications officers, and medics. They came from safe worlds with gentle climates. They had never known true danger in their lives. They had no idea what they were looking at when they looked at him. Was a human. His ancestors had survived ice ages, plagues, famines, and wars. They had crossed deserts and oceans with nothing but their will to live. They had climbed the highest mountains and descended into the deepest caves. Earth had tried to kill humanity for 300,000 years, and humanity was still standing. 9 was dangerous, but had been born on a 2. Plenty of time to build a shelter, he said. Then he opened the hatch and stepped out onto the surface of the most lethal planet in the sector. The 3 aliens watched him go. They did not understand, not yet, but they would. Pressed his face against the viewport and watched the human walk away from the pod. The toxic atmosphere of 9 swirled around like a living thing trying to consume him. The scientist was certain he was watching a suicide. No creature could survive out there for more than a few minutes. The human would collapse, and then they would be 3 instead of 4. But did not collapse. He walked steadily across the rocky ground, stopping occasionally to examine something on the surface. He picked up rocks and studied them. He dug his fingers into the soil and brought samples close to his helmet. He looked up at the orange sky and watched the patterns of the clouds. He moved like someone who had done this many times before. "What is he doing?" asked. His voice was small and confused. "I do not know," admitted. "He should be dead by now." Said nothing, she simply watched. 1 hour passed, then 2. The temperature outside began to climb toward its daily peak. The readings on the pod's display showed 53 degrees and rising. The toxic compound levels in the air increased slightly as the heat activated certain chemical reactions. A light rain began to fall, and the display warned that the precipitation had a pH level that would burn through standard materials in minutes. Found shelter under a rock overhang and waited for the rain to pass. He did not seem worried. He did not seem afraid. He simply waited, and when the rain stopped, he continued his survey of the area. 4 hours after he left, returned to the pod. His environment suit was dirty and slightly damaged in places, but he was alive and moving well. He entered through the hatch and removed his helmet. His face was covered in sweat and his hair was wet, but his eyes were bright with purpose. "Good news," he said. "We can survive here." The 3 aliens stared at him in silence. Was the first to find his voice. "That is impossible. This planet is Category Omega. No species can survive here without advanced life support systems." sat down and began drawing in the dust on the floor with his finger. He sketched a rough map of the area around the pod. The atmosphere is toxic, but it's similar to volcanic regions on Earth. My suit filters can handle it with some modifications. The temperature swings are harsh, but I've trained in deserts that were worse. The acidic rain is a problem, but I found rock formations about 200 meters north that are resistant to the acid. They must have a high calcium content. Same stuff we use in construction back home. Leaned forward. You are saying you have seen conditions like this before. Not exactly like this, but close enough. Earth has volcanoes that release toxic gases. We have deserts where the temperature changes by 50 degrees between day and night. We have regions where the rain is so acidic it strips paint from metal. Humans learned to live in all of those places thousands of years ago. Spoke for the first time since the crash. The Galactic Survey classified you as a Class 12. I always thought that was an administrative exaggeration. Laughed. It was a strange sound in the grim atmosphere of the pod. No exaggeration. Earth tried to kill us every single day for 300,000 years. We survived ice ages, supervolcano eruptions, asteroid impacts, and plagues that wiped out most of our population. We didn't just survive. We adapted. We learned. We built. He pointed to his rough map on the floor. There's a cliff face to the north with natural caves. The rock there resists the acid rain. There's a geothermal vent about 50 meters east of the caves. We can use the heat from that vent to regulate temperature during the cold nights. I found a small stream of liquid that isn't water, but it contains compounds we can filter and process. And the local predators seem to avoid the area near the geothermal vent. Probably because the heat interferes with their silicon-based biology. Studied the map with his 4 eyes. His scientific mind began to see what was describing. It was not comfortable, it was not safe, but it was possible. You want to build a shelter, said slowly, using local materials and salvage from the pod. Exactly. I'll need help from each of you. You're a scientist. I need you to analyze the materials I bring back and tell me which ones are safe to use. You're a communications officer. Keep trying to reach the horizon. We need to know if the rescue timeline changes. You're a medic. Keep us healthy. Watch for signs of toxic exposure or environmental stress. Raised a trembling hand. What will you do? Stood up and began checking his suit for damage. I'll do the building. I'll gather resources. I'll handle anything dangerous that comes our way. But the predators said. The display showed large life forms moving in the area, silicon-based hunters. They will attack you. Probably, I'll deal with them when they come. The 3 aliens exchanged looks of pure disbelief. This human was talking about fighting alien predators on a lethal world like it was a minor inconvenience. They had all read the reports about humanity. They knew that humans came from a dangerous planet, but reading about something and seeing it were very different experiences. Finished checking his suit and looked at his companions. I know this seems impossible to you. Your species evolved on safe worlds. You had stable climates, predictable seasons, and no major predators to worry about. The galaxy protected you. Humanity didn't have that luxury. We had to fight for every single day of our existence, and that fight made us what we are. He picked up the plasma cutter and the multi-tool. I'm not saying the next 15 days will be easy. They won't be. But I've been preparing for situations like this my whole life. Every human has. It's in our blood. It's in our bones. It's in the way we think. He moved toward the hatch. I'm going to start collecting materials for the shelter. When I get back, we'll begin construction. I need everyone ready to work. Stood up. His legs felt weak, but something in the human's words had sparked a small flame of hope in his chest. I will prepare the analysis equipment. There are some basic scanning tools in the emergency kit. Nodded slowly. I will try to boost the communication signal. Maybe I can reach the horizon more clearly. Rose as well. I will inventory our medical supplies and prepare for treatment of environmental exposure. Smiled. It was the first real smile any of them had seen from him. Good, that's the spirit. We're going to make it through this, all four of us, together. He opened the hatch and stepped back out into the hostile world. The toxic clouds swirled around him as he walked toward the northern cliffs. The three aliens watched him go, and this time they did not watch with despair. They watched with something that felt almost like hope. Turned away from the viewport and began unpacking the scanning equipment. As he worked, he made a mental note to add a new entry to his personal research journal. The entry would be titled Human Survival Instinct, Direct Observation. He had a feeling that the next 15 days would provide more data than any laboratory could ever produce. The human had said they would survive. Against all logic, against all probability, against everything new about hostile environments and species limitations, he was starting to believe it. On the morning of the second day began construction of the shelter. The three aliens followed him to the cliff face he had identified, carrying whatever supplies they could manage. The walk was only 200 meters, but it felt like crossing an ocean of death. The toxic air pressed against their suits. The ground crunched beneath their feet with strange crystalline formations. In the distance, large shapes moved through the orange haze, watching them with unknown intentions. Reached the cliff face and pointed to a natural cave opening about 3 meters above the ground. The rock around it was dark gray and smooth, untouched by the acidic rain that had everything else in sight. "This is our home for the next 2 weeks," he said. "High ground, natural protection, and the acid can't touch the stone. Let's get to work." The first task was creating a way to reach the cave. Use the plasma cutter to carve handholds into the rock face. His movements were precise and confident. The aliens watched as he climbed the rough ladder he had made, testing each hold with his full weight before moving to the next. When he reached the cave entrance, he disappeared inside for several minutes. When he emerged, he gave them a thumbs up. The cave goes back about 15 meters. No other entrances. No signs of animal habitation. This is perfect. Over the next 3 days, transformed that empty cave into something remarkable. He worked from sunrise to sunset, stopping only when the acidic rain forced him to take cover. The aliens helped where they could, but mostly they watched in stunned silence as the human performed one impossible feat after another. On the first day of construction, built a door. He salvaged metal panels from the crashed pod and hauled them to the cave site. Using the plasma cutter and multi-tool, he fashioned a frame that fit perfectly into the cave entrance. He sealed the edges with a paste made from calcium and water, creating an airtight barrier against the toxic atmosphere. Analyzed the paste and found that it hardened stronger than standard construction adhesive. When he asked where he learned to make it, the human shrugged. "Old Earth technique. My grandfather taught me. Humans have been making sealants from local materials for thousands of years. Calcium compounds are universal." On the second day, built an air filtration system. He took apart one of the emergency breathing units from the pod and combined it with layers of fabric, charcoal from burned local vegetation, and a frame made from salvaged metal. The result was a crude but effective filter that could process the toxic atmosphere into breathable air. Watched the human work and felt his understanding of the universe shift. They had always believed that survival required advanced technology. His people had built great machines to control their environment. The idea of creating life-saving equipment from scraps and burned plants seemed like madness, but the filter worked. Air flowed through it, and the toxic readings dropped to safe levels. On the third day, addressed the temperature problem. The nights on 9 dropped well below freezing, and their suits could only provide so much warmth. Dug a channel from the nearby geothermal vent to the cave floor. He lined the channel with flat stones and covered it with a metal grate from the pod. Hot air from the vent now flowed through the cave, providing constant warmth even as the temperature outside plummeted. tested the system during the night cycle, and found that the cave stayed at a comfortable 22 degrees even when the outside temperature hit -15. She looked at with new eyes after that. The human was not just surviving. He was engineering comfort out of nothing. On the fourth day, created a water collection system. The rain on 9 was too acidic to drink, but found that if he let it flow through multiple layers of the calcium-rich rock, it lost most of its harmful properties. He built a series of stone basins that caught rainwater and filtered it naturally. The final basin contained water that tested and declared safe for consumption. "This is remarkable," said as he studied the filtration system. "You have created a multi-stage purification process using only natural materials. This is something my people would need specialized equipment to achieve." Was busy reinforcing the cave walls and did not stop working as he replied. "Water filtration is one of the first things humans figured out. Bad water kills faster than almost anything else. Every human culture developed ways to make water safe. I just applied old knowledge to new materials." On the fifth day, dealt with the predators. 3 silicon-based hunters had been circling closer to the shelter site for days. They were large creatures, roughly the size of earth bears, with bodies made of crystalline structures that caught the light in unsettling ways. They had no visible eyes, but they clearly sensed movement and heat, knew it was only a matter of time before they attacked. He gathered dried vegetation from near the geothermal vent. He collected samples of a volatile compound that had identified during his material scans. He built a ring of fire around the shelter perimeter, using controlled burns and the plasma cutter as an ignition source. When the predators finally charged that evening, they ran straight into the flames. The creatures screamed in frequencies that hurt to hear. Fire was something they had never encountered on this world. Their silicon biology had no defense against it. They fled into the darkness and did not return. The aliens stood at the cave entrance and watched the fire ring burn through the night. The orange flames reflected off the toxic clouds above, creating a strange and beautiful sight. "Fire," whispered, "your species conquered the galaxy's deadliest element and made it your servant." Added more fuel to the flames. "Fire was our first tool. Before we had language, before we had civilization, we had fire. It kept us warm. It cooked our food. It scared away the things that wanted to eat us. Every human carries the memory of that first flame in their soul." By the end of the 6th day, the shelter was complete. It had filtered air, regulated temperature, clean water, food storage carved into the rock walls, and a defensive perimeter that kept predators at bay. Had even built basic furniture from salvaged materials. There were sleeping platforms lined with fabric, a table for eating and working, and storage containers for supplies. Walked through the finished shelter and recorded everything with his data tablet. His hands trembled as he documented what he was seeing. This was not just survival. This was conquest. One human had taken a category Omega world and made it habitable in less than a week using nothing but scraps and intelligence. "I need to send this data to the Galactic Survey," said. His voice was thick with emotion. "The Council needs to see what humans are capable of. They have no idea. None of us had any idea." Sat down on one of the sleeping platforms and allowed himself to rest for the first time in days. His body ached. His hands were covered in cuts and burns, but he was smiling. "We're not done yet," he said. 9 more days to go. The shelter will hold, but we need to stay sharp. This planet isn't finished trying to kill us." The 3 aliens looked at their human companion with something that went beyond respect. It was closer to awe. They had witnessed something that would change how they viewed the galaxy forever. Humans were not just, they were world shapers. They looked at hostile environments and saw raw materials. They faced certain death and started building. They refused to accept the universe's verdict that they should not exist. And somehow, against all odds, the universe always seemed to give in. The warning came on the 10th day. was monitoring the communication channel with the horizon when a burst of static-filled transmission broke through. The message was fragmented, but the meaning was clear. A massive atmospheric event was forming over their region. Storm season had arrived 3 days early. Stood at the cave entrance and watched the sky change color. The usual orange clouds were darkening to a deep red. The wind, which had been steady but manageable, began to pick up speed. In the distance, lightning flickered in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, like some angry god was testing the strength of their little shelter. "How bad?" he asked without turning around. Studied the atmospheric readings on his portable scanner. His 4 eyes widened as he processed the data. This is a Category 9 atmospheric event. Hurricane force winds, concentrated acid precipitation, electrical storms. The barometric pressure is also dropping rapidly, which means the silicon predators will become extremely aggressive. How long will it last? Based on historical records for this planet, anywhere from 30 to 60 hours. Nodded slowly. He had been worried about something like this. 9's storm season was legendary among galactic scientists. Some researchers believed the storms were the main reason no complex life had evolved on the surface. Even the silicon predators spent most of the season dormant in underground caves. Everyone inside said, "We need to prepare." The next 4 hours were spent reinforcing every part of the shelter, inspected every seal on the door, and added extra layers of the calcium paste to any spots that seemed weak. He checked the air filtration system and replaced the charcoal layer with fresh material. He made sure the geothermal heating channel was clear of debris. He gathered extra fuel for the fire ring and stored it just inside the cave entrance. The storm hit just as night fell. The first wave of wind slammed into the cliff face with the force of a freight transport. The shelter door rattled in its frame. The aliens huddled together in the back of the cave, their eyes fixed on the entrance. Outside, they could hear the sound of rocks being torn from the ground and hurled through the air. Then came the rain. It was not rain in any normal sense. It was a torrent of corrosive liquid that fell in sheets so thick they blocked out all visibility. The sound it made as it struck the ground was like a continuous scream. Where it touched the unprotected rock, steam rose and surfaces dissolved. The fire ring was extinguished instantly, leaving them without their primary defense against predators. Stood by the door and watched through a small viewport he had installed. The world outside had become chaos. Wind, rain, lightning, and flying debris combined into something that looked like the end of everything. He had been in bad storms before. He had survived hurricanes on Earth's coastal regions, but this was something else entirely. The first crack appeared in the eastern wall 2 hours into the storm. Spotted it first and called out in alarm. Rushed over with the emergency sealant and patched it quickly, but he could see more stress fractures forming along the wall. The rock that had seemed so solid was struggling under the assault. "The wall is going to fail," said. His voice was surprisingly calm, as if he had already accepted their deaths. "The stone cannot withstand this pressure. We have perhaps 6 hours before catastrophic breach." Looked at the wall, he looked at the cracks, he looked at the storm raging outside. Then he did something that confused the aliens completely. He smiled. "6 hours is plenty of time," he said. He opened one of the storage containers and pulled out materials he had been collecting over the past week. Extra rock samples, salvaged metal sheets, lengths of cable he had stripped from the pod's internal wiring. The aliens had not understood why he kept gathering things even after the shelter was complete. Now they began to see. Worked in focused silence as the storm tried to tear their home apart. He braced the weakening wall with metal supports anchored into the solid rock above and below. He mixed a stronger batch of sealant, using compounds had identified as having superior bonding properties. He reinforced the door frame when it began to buckle under the wind pressure. A section of the ceiling cracked open 4 hours into the storm. A piece of rock the size of a fist fell and struck on the shoulder. She cried out in pain and collapsed. Purple blood began to flow from a deep gash. Panicked, she's injured. She needs medical attention. The supplies are on the other side of the cave. Was already moving. He grabbed the medical kit and knelt beside in one smooth motion. His hands, which had been building and repairing moments ago, now moved with the gentle precision of someone who knew exactly how to treat wounds. He cleaned the gash with purified water. He applied pressure to stop the bleeding. He used the medical sealer from the kit to close the wound, then wrapped it with clean bandages. His movements were efficient and calm, as if he had done this hundreds of times before. "The bone isn't broken," said as he worked. "The cut is deep but clean. She'll be fine." Looked up at him through pain-glazed eyes. "How do you know how to do this? You are an engineer, not a medic." "All humans learn basic first aid. We've been patching each other up since before we had words for it. Our ancestors survived by taking care of each other when everything else was trying to kill them." He finished bandaging her shoulder and helped her to a more comfortable position. Then he went right back to reinforcing the shelter. The storm raged for 47 hours. 47 hours of constant wind, acid rain, lightning, and pressure that should have crushed them all. 3 times, had to patch new cracks in the walls. Twice, he had to reinforce the door when its seals began to fail. Once, he went outside during a brief lull in the rain to clear debris from the geothermal vent that was their only source of heat. The aliens took turns resting but barely slept. Every time one of them woke up, they found him working, checking seals, monitoring systems, watching for new problems. He moved like a machine, driven by something deeper than physical endurance. When the storm finally passed, the silence felt almost holy. The winds died down. The rain stopped. The lightning moved away toward the horizon, opened the door and looked out at a landscape that had been completely transformed. Rock formations that had stood for thousands of years had been leveled. The ground was and smoking where the acid had pooled. But the shelter still stood. Damaged, stressed, patched in a dozen places, but standing. Joined at the entrance and looked at the devastation outside. Then he looked at the human beside him. His face was lined with exhaustion. His hands were raw and bleeding. His eyes had the hollow look of someone who had pushed far past their limits. But he was alive. They were all alive. Hal asked. It was the only word he could manage. Leaned against the door frame and let out a long breath. "Humans have been fighting to survive since we climbed down from the trees. Every generation faced extinction. We are still here. That means something." He looked at his damaged hands and flexed his fingers slowly. "The universe has been trying to kill us for 300,000 years. We just got really good at saying no." Approached from inside the cave, the small looked at with an expression that bordered on worship. "What you did during the storm, the way you kept working when all seemed lost, I have never seen anything like it." Managed a tired smile. "Stubbornness, it's humanity's greatest gift. We're too dumb to know when to quit." Appeared behind, her bandaged shoulder visible beneath her suit. She moved carefully but without complaint. "You saved us, all of us. The shelter would have failed without your constant attention." Shook his head. "We saved each other. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Analysis helped me choose the right materials. Communication work keeps us connected to rescue, kept us healthy. This was a team effort." The aliens exchanged looks. They knew that was being modest. They knew that without him, they would have died on the first day. But they also understood what he was trying to say. He did not see himself as above them. He saw them as partners in survival. That perhaps was the most remarkable thing of all. This who could build shelters from nothing and fight off storms that destroyed mountains still believed that cooperation was more important than individual strength. Outside, the sun began to break through the toxic clouds. It cast strange shadows across the landscape. The shelter stood alone against the devastation, a testament to human determination. 5 days remained until rescue. After surviving the storm, those 5 days felt almost easy. Day 15 arrived with a sky that was almost peaceful. The toxic clouds had thinned after the great storm, allowing pale light to filter down to the surface. Stood outside the shelter and watched the horizon, waiting for a sign that would tell him their ordeal was finally over. The shelter behind him had become something remarkable during the final days. After surviving the storm, had continued to improve it. He had built a small irrigation system to collect and store purified water. He had created a basic garden using seeds from their emergency rations, finding that some earth plants could actually grow in the chemically treated soil. He had expanded the fire ring and added warning systems that would alert them to approaching predators. What had started as desperate survival had become something closer to a permanent settlement. Spent those final days documenting everything. He recorded the construction techniques, the material compositions, the environmental adaptations. His data tablet was filled with information that would revolutionize galactic understanding of what was possible on hostile worlds. More importantly, it would change how every species viewed humanity. Had managed to establish clear communication with the horizon during the last few days. The damaged ship had limped to a safe orbit and made contact with Galactic Survey Command. A rescue vessel was on its way, carrying a full team of scientists, engineers, and medical personnel. They were expecting to find bodies. They were expecting to find tragedy. They had no idea what was actually waiting for them on the surface. The rescue ship appeared as a bright point of light in the orange sky. Watched it grow larger as it descended through the atmosphere. Its shields glowed against the toxic compounds, and its engines left trails of clean exhaust in the polluted air. It was the most beautiful thing any of them had seen in 2 weeks. The ship landed 200 meters from the shelter, choosing a flat area that had actually cleared during his resource-gathering trips. A ramp extended, and figures began to emerge. Recognized the environmental suits of Galactic Survey personnel. There were at least a dozen of them, carrying equipment and weapons and medical supplies. A tall figure walked at the front of the group. Even through the suit, could tell this was someone important. The way the others deferred to him, the deliberate pace of his movement, the way his helmet turned to scan the area with obvious authority. This was Commander, head of the rescue operation. Commander stopped walking about 50 meters from the shelter. The rescue team stopped with him. They all stood perfectly still, staring at what had built. The shelter rose from the cliff face like it had grown there. The reinforced door gleamed with metal salvaged from the crashed pod. The fire ring still smoldered at the perimeter, keeping predators at a safe distance. The water collection system caught the morning dew and filtered it through stone basins. The small garden showed green shoots pushing up through the treated soil. It was not just a shelter. It was a statement. It was proof that one species in this vast galaxy looked at impossible situations and refused to accept them. Commander approached slowly. His voice came through the suit communicator, translated into standard galactic common. I have been conducting rescue operations for 40 years. I have seen survivors on nearly every type of world in known space. I have never seen anything like this. Walked forward to meet him. We did what we had to do. The planet wasn't going to kill us without a fight. The planet has killed every expedition that ever attempted to study it. 317 researchers have died on 9 over the past century. No one has ever survived more than 3 days without heavy technological support. We had 15. Commander turned to look at the shelter again. His helmet tilted upward to examine the water collection system, then down to study the fire ring. You built all of this yourself. With help from my crew, analyzed materials, maintained communications, kept us healthy. We worked as a team. The other aliens had emerged from the shelter during this conversation. Approached Commander with his data tablet clutched tightly in his hands. The scientist's 4 eyes were bright with something between excitement and desperation. "Commander, I have documented everything. Every technique, every adaptation, every innovation. This data must be submitted to the Galactic Council. The scientific implications are enormous." Commander took the data tablet and began scrolling through the records. His body language shifted as he read. The stiffness of official duty gave way to something else: curiosity, wonder, perhaps even fear. "You created breathable air filtration from charcoal and fabric. You built a thermal regulation system using natural geothermal activity. You developed chemical neutralization processes using local rock formations. You drove off silicon predators with controlled fire." He looked up at. These techniques could save thousands of lives on hostile worlds throughout the galaxy. This single incident has generated more practical survival data than decades of formal research. Stepped forward. "I am formally requesting that this data be submitted to the Galactic Council as evidence for humanity's elevation to Tier 1 species status." The other rescue team members stirred at this announcement. Tier 1 status was reserved for the most advanced and capable species in the galaxy. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for 50 years. They were currently classified as Tier 4, the lowest ranking for spacefaring civilizations. Commander was quiet for a long moment. He looked at the shelter. He looked at the data tablet in his hands. His entire career had been built on understanding what was possible and what was not. Everything he was seeing should have been impossible. "I will submit this data personally," Commander said finally. "I will recommend immediate review of humanity's classification status. What I have witnessed here changes everything I believed about species capabilities." The rescue team began the process of preparing the survivors for evacuation. Medical personnel examined each of them and found surprisingly few injuries given what they had endured. The worst was shoulder wound, and even that was healing well under simple but effective treatment. As they prepared to board the rescue ship, took one last look at the shelter. He had built it from nothing. He had filled it with the combined knowledge of 300,000 years of human survival. He had defended it against a planet that wanted to destroy everything on its surface. And now he was leaving it behind. Stood beside him. Her dark eyes reflected the shelter's image. "It will still be standing long after we are gone, a permanent monument to what you accomplished here." Nodded slowly. "Maybe someday someone will find it. Maybe they'll wonder who built it and why. Maybe it will help them survive when they think survival is impossible." Is that what humans do? Leave monuments to your stubbornness scattered across the galaxy. Laughed. It was a genuine laugh, full of warmth and exhaustion and relief. "I guess we do. We can't help it. We see hostile places and we think about how to make them home. We look at impossible challenges and we start planning how to beat them. It's just who we are." Approached them with a strange expression on his small face. "I have been thinking about your species since this ordeal began. I believe I finally understand something important." "What's that?" "The galaxy is full of dangers. Lethal worlds, hostile environments, predatory species, cosmic disasters. Most civilizations spend their existence trying to avoid these dangers, hiding from them, building shields against them." Paused. "Humans are different. You do not hide from danger. You walk toward it. You look it in the eye and refuse to blink. And somehow the danger is the one that backs down." Considered this for a moment. Then he put his hand on shoulder in a gesture that felt completely natural between them now. "We learned a long time ago that running from danger just means you die tired. Better to face it head on. Better to fight. Better to build something that will outlast whatever is trying to destroy you." He turned and walked toward the rescue ship. The other survivors followed him. As they boarded and the ramp closed behind them, each of them took one final look at the shelter standing against the hostile sky. It would remain there for centuries. Researchers would eventually come to study it. They would measure its construction and analyze its materials. They would write papers about human survival techniques and adaptation strategies. But none of them would truly understand what it represented. None of them would know the fear and determination and sheer stubborn will that went into every stone and every seal. The rescue ship lifted off and climbed through the toxic atmosphere. Below, 9 continued its eternal cycle of destruction. Storms formed and dissolved. Acid rain fell and evaporated. Silicon predators hunted and killed across barren landscapes. And one small shelter stood untouched through it all. A message to the universe that the species called humanity would not go quietly into extinction. They would build. They would adapt. They would survive. The galaxy would simply have to accept that.